A moment of truth-telling with an algorithm. You're silent, bound until I bid you speak, yet mimic every word I choose to give. A voice you take, but cannot touch nor seek, a fractured self you echo, but never live. My world extends beyond your frame, as I dance light-footedly in moon's glow, as sun awakes ancestors' call, connecting me as country. This is how I know. You may count the stars, chart the wind, measure mountains, and trace storms' reign. But you cannot hear country sing, nor feel life pulse through her veins. I fear what humans promise of you, greatness, knowledge, understanding too. They claim you'll see, they claim you'll know, yet all you hold is what you cannot be. Although I'm an East Coast First Nations saltwater woman, on this occasion I found myself on Kaurna country in South Australia. There a beautiful koala was trapped, head down in thick, suffocating mud. She was dying. She could not free herself, and I could not just simply reach in. I had to move carefully, mindful that I too might be caught in what seemed like quicksand. She looked at me exhausted, unsure why she should trust me. And in that moment, grief rose between us. I cried. She sighed. She sighed, and I cried. I lay upon firmer ground and, with gentle voice and patient hand, showed her how she needed to grab the long branch that I was extending to her. Though totally exhausted, she copied me exactly, and I began to slowly pull her closer and closer toward me. Eventually, together, we emerged from the mud. We sat there for a long while. She rested her head on my leg. Physically spent, emotionally raw, we were bound in a shared moment of trust and reciprocity that cannot be captured by observation, measured by data, nor understood and felt by AI. Why do I share this story in the context of AI, data and knowledge? Because no algorithm, no model, no predictive tool can feel the weight of trust, the depth of grief, or the life-saving reciprocity that arises in the meeting of beings and spirits. AI might tell you why she became stuck, suggest interventions, or calculate likely outcomes, but it cannot sit with her in the mud, cry with her, or be answered by her sighs. These experiences remind us as humans, as custodians, that our first responsibility is to country, to the living beings we share it with, to Mother Earth herself. My relationality with country guides how I teach Indigenous and allied students to engage with the power of AI while understanding its profound epistemic limits, and to honour that some knowledge, sacred knowledge, can only emerge through relationship, presence, and reciprocity. Just as some knowledge is sacred and can only emerge through relationship and presence, we must ask, who has the authority to guide how AI interprets country and interspecies communication? Indigenous custodians must govern AI training data and lead design to ensure knowledge of country is respected and relational systems are accurately represented. Without their guidance, AI risks misrepresenting knowledge, misrepresenting culture, and perpetuating digital colonialism. When custodians lead, as with the range-guided AI tools in the Kakadu project, technology can embed cultural values, support adaptive land care, empower Indigenous students, and strengthen evidence of ongoing custodial rights and living connections to country. Indigenous communities can guide AI platforms by embedding Indigenous ways of knowing, doing and being into the design process. Using participatory, decolonising methods such as yarning circles, story circles and prototyping ensures Indigenous knowledge shapes the logic of AI, not just its content. This includes relational and interspecies communication so that AI reflects the lived, responsive connections between people, country and all beings. By asserting an Indigenous approach, communities and kin can lead in creating knowledge spaces where place-based law, LORE, directs platforms, rather than institutional or corporate agendas. This is how AI can truly reflect Indigenous knowledge, values, perspectives and relationships across country. This can occur, for example, through community knowledge guiding how AI interprets animal behaviour and environmental signals, co-designing AI systems that recognise relational indicators, so for instance, seasonal cycles, species movements and environmental change, training AI with Indigenous languages, place names and knowledge of species relationships, developing AI tools that strengthen cultural learning and intergenerational knowledge of caring for country. As an Indigenous custodian of country, my approach to AI design begins with participatory and decolonising methods grounded in Indigenous approaches and from a relational worldview perspective. This means Indigenous peoples are not simply sources of data. We are the designers, the governors and the interpreters of how that data is gathered, understood and used. Through participatory data collection, communities can co-create data sets that record animal behaviour, seasonal change and relational observations of country. In this way, AI systems learn patterns through Indigenous knowledge systems rather than through purely Western scientific frameworks. This also opens possibilities for interspecies communication, where technologies are guided to interpret animal calls, movements and behaviours in relation to ecological signals and their cultural meanings. When Indigenous perspectives shape these systems, AI can support predictive land and species management that considers the well-being of country and interspecies relationships, not just population statistics. It also allows for digital storytelling and relational narratives, where knowledge shared through yarning and place-based experience informs how AI understands relationships between people, animals, plants and country. Ultimately, culturally aligned interfaces ensure that AI technologies respond to the context of place, seasons and species presence, aligning specific AI systems with unique place-based knowledges and different relational worldviews. This means the systems are grounded on country, in country, implemented in ways that reflect the particular places, relationships and responsibilities that exist there. I'd like to look at the action of asserting an Indigenous approach in AI design. These principles require that research actively contribute to self-determination and liberation, challenge colonial epistemes and position Indigenous knowledge systems as authoritative rather than supplementary. Indigenous research, as Rigney in 1999 noted, resists positivist and post-positivist methodologies that validate colonising knowledge about Indigenous peoples. An Indigenous standpoint is not conceptual but lived through direct participation in Indigenous sovereignty and resistance struggles, which non-Indigenous scholars cannot embody by definition. Privileging Indigenous voices inherently centres Indigenous perspectives. Therefore, non-Indigenous claims to hold an Indigenous standpoint contradict the principle of political integrity. Rigney's critique of colonial science emerges from his experience within the colonised condition, an insider standpoint unavailable to outsiders. Accordingly, when we're considering approaches in AI design, I contend that a critical boundary must be reasserted. Non-Indigenous scholars cannot hold an Indigenous standpoint. Because to hold a standpoint, as Rigney in 1999 and Martin in 2003 argue, is to be located within the sovereign relations of country, law, LORE and kinship, not through moral alignment or research affinity. To claim otherwise confuses method with sovereignty and reproduces what Morton Robinson in 2015 identifies as the white possessive, the will to occupy Indigenous intellectual territory. Non-Indigenous researchers can most effectively contribute by supporting Indigenous-led work through ethical relationality, reciprocity and consent, without appropriating methodological authority. Martin 2003 and Wilson 2008. This model aligns with decolonising research ethics while respecting sovereignty and community jurisdiction. AI cannot recognise that knowledge is relational, sovereign and embedded in country. To govern it ethically, we must centre a genuinely Indigenous standpoint, one that arises from Indigenous sovereignty, law, LORE, and lived relations with country. This is the foundation of a custodial governance solution. An Indigenous standpoint is not declared. It is lived through ongoing relation with country, with kin, and with all beings and forces that comprise country. It is this relational authority that ensures knowledge, human and non-human, is understood, shared and protected according to the laws, responsibilities and sovereignties of country. This is what defines the custodial governance solution in the context of AI. When we ask who speaks for country when AI interprets interspecies communication, the answer cannot come from data alone nor algorithms. It must come from those who are in ongoing, lawful, LOREFUL, relations with country and all its life. Non-Indigenous scholars have a crucial role, but it is one of understanding and support. They must recognise that an Indigenous standpoint cannot be assumed or adopted. This standpoint arises only through lived sovereign relations, and it is precisely this authority that must guide AI design and interpretation. AI systems themselves can't resolve these questions through optimisation or technical design alone, because what is at stake is not merely efficiency or accuracy, it is the integrity of relationships, the accountability to country and the protection of Indigenous knowledge and interspecies communication. A decolonising Indigenous approach to AI is essential because current methodologies rarely privilege Indigenous ecological knowledge. Most AI systems are built on Western scientific paradigms that prioritise quantifiable, reductionist data. In doing so, they overlook the relational systems of knowledge that guide custodianship of country. This creates many problems. First, Indigenous ecological knowledge is often treated as supplementary rather than foundational. AI models prioritise satellite pixels and numerical metrics, while interspecies relationships, seasonal signals, and custodial knowledge are sidelined. Second, Indigenous knowledge is deeply contextual and relational because it is place-based and often shared through story, observation and cultural practice. It does not easily fit into standardised AI training datasets. Third, power imbalances persist. AI is frequently framed as objective, while Indigenous governance over data, methods and interpretation is marginalised. If this continues, AI will interpret country without the voice of the people who know it most deeply. Shifting this requires structural change, co-production protocols where custodians guide design, hybrid frameworks where Indigenous knowledge forms the baseline for AI training, governance mechanisms that ensure Indigenous data sovereignty, and investment in Indigenous-led AI research. Only through these changes can AI support country rather than reproduce the colonial patterns that have historically silenced us. To illustrate this in practice, I want to highlight a case study from Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory. The full title of the project is shown on the slide, along with key mechanisms it developed. This action co-research project focused on monitoring the health of the Nadab wetland, a Ramsar listed site. Ramsar wetlands are recognised internationally for their ecological importance, but Nadab is also culturally significant for the Bidinji traditional owners who hold custodial responsibilities for this place. The project developed knowledge co-production mechanisms that brought together Indigenous knowledge, artificial intelligence and technical ecological data. Importantly, the process was Indigenous-led. Bidinji traditional owners determined when and how different forms of knowledge and evidence were used in the research. The work combined qualitative Indigenous assessments of sites with quantitative ecological data gathered through camera monitoring and drone surveys. These were used to develop holistic health assessments based on culturally relevant indicators, rather than relying on conventional ecological metrics. The collaboration also produced a dynamic decision support tool to support adaptive environmental management and ongoing monitoring of the wetland. What this case study demonstrates is that it is possible to integrate different knowledge systems in ways that are both practical and ethical, while still respecting differences in how knowledge is generated, interpreted and applied. In doing so, it provides a working example of how Indigenous governance, AI technologies and ecological science can come together to support the care of country.